Hey, my name is Ivan, you're watching Player Lair, and today I'm running through a list of 10 games. It is a top 10, it's the top 10 games I thought of while, right before filming this video, of games that I've recently played and I've really loved. I don't think it's a definitive, is there such a thing as a definitive top 10 list? For me, these are games that I've really enjoyed playing and that I would highly recommend. And what I've tried to do with this list is basically get games that are of different genres so that there's something for everyone hopefully in this list. Some of them are quite heavy games, some of them are very, very light. I've got one game which, I don't know if it's even considered a board game, it's a game. But anyway, most of these games, a lot of them I'm sure you've heard of, some of them I think might surprise you. And one thing that I want to say beforehand is that I don't have all of these games. My collection is behind me takes up 3 shelves on there. I've got a few more games actually that aren't on this shelf space, but what me and my friends do is we kind of fill in each other's collections because we play together a lot. Not lately, for some reason though. A lot of the games you're gonna notice are solo games, or have a solo mode. That's because I've been playing a lot of solo games. Most of the ones that I have a solo mode. That's like an important thing for me. But here is the list, and hopefully you're gonna find out about some cool new games, or maybe you're gonna find out that I have a similar taste. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe nothing will happen. To start this list off, I'll start off with a game which I don't have on my shelf, and it is a game called Architects of the West Kingdom. It is one of my favorite worker placement games. There's one more in this list which I think is also amazing, but Architects of the West Kingdom to me is just feels so fresh, and I love playing it, especially at higher player counts. I think if you want to get into worker placement games where you're placing workers and interacting with other players, which sometimes in worker placement games they're not high interaction. Here I feel like the interaction is a bit more, because one of the more innovative mechanics in this game is that you get to imprison other people's workers, and basically the one way to get your workers back is either somebody else takes them from you and sends them to prison, or you do that to your own workers and take them back. The cool thing about the game is how it scales. So basically, whenever you go on a worker placement spot, there is no limit. For most spots on the board, there's no limit how many workers can go there. But for every one worker, you're getting one of the resource, or some of them you need 2 workers per resource. But it just scales a lot. So the more workers you have, the more that you're getting, and you feel super powerful. But if somebody else sees you, they're going to be incentivized to take all your workers away because they're going to get resources for that. Or they're just going to be incentivized to take them away because they're going to see that you're getting a lot of resources. If you've done the same action like 4 or 5 times in a turn, that's a lot of resources. So Architects of the West Kingdom, my number 10, though in no specific order. So Architects of the West Kingdom is a really good game. The next game on my shelf is a solo-only game, and it came out quite recently. I've already made a couple of videos on it, and I'm currently playing through the campaign. I think it's an amazing game. I can't stop talking about it. I think that I've mentioned it in every single YouTube video I have so far, and it is this beautiful game. So Under Falling Skies is for 1 player, but don't let that put you off, and don't let that stop you from buying it, because it works great. We've played it at 2 players, we've played it at 3 players, and basically the way it works at those player counts is you just decide together. And I actually personally even prefer playing it with other players because it's such a deep puzzle that it's really helpful having somebody else look at a part of the board that you're not looking at. So the theme of the game is basically Space Invaders. There's alien ships which are kind of descending upon the Earth, and you need to stop them. And the way that you do that is you have dice manipulation, or dice placement. So basically you roll 5 dice, and you can choose where to place them. There's a bunch of rooms where you can place them. But what the twist is that the dice that are good for you, generally the higher numbers, they're more powerful, but they're also more powerful for your enemies. So basically, the way that works is you place a high number, say a 6, for something that you need. For example, research in this game is kind of your victory track. So you need to complete it in order to win the game. But in placing that 6 on that research, the aliens that are in that row are going to move down 6, so they're going to be a lot closer to your base. And if enough aliens hit your base, it's game over. But this game it's a really nice brain burner. And the other cool thing is it has a campaign. So it is not, you play through it once and, it's the same thing over and over again. No, there's a campaign and it's got some really nice twists and turns, and I think they've done a fantastic job with it. So if you're interested in a solo game that presents replayability or really deep, like some really deep gameplay, I highly recommend this one. I've enjoyed it so much that I just recommend it to everyone. But yeah, it's a game which I've enjoyed a lot, and it's making this list. Now, the next game is a lighter game because this one is fairly, thinky. It's very brain burning. The next game, my number 8, is Cartographers, and Cartographers is just a wonderful game. Again, you can play it solo, but you can play it with as many people as you want. There's not that much interaction in the game. The thing that really shines in this game for me, whether you play it solo or with other players, is first of all how simple it is. It's such a simple idea that anyone can get it. Second of all, it's how beautiful it is at the end. That's something that always, I love it when a game at the end you're like, oh, I've made something, I've done something. It feels really creative. And that's something that I always experience with Cartographers. The other thing is it's got this really cool scoring mechanic. So basically the way that it works is you can see and this isn't something that's only there. I think Isle of Skye has something similar. There's some other games that have a scoring mechanic like that, but I think it's what makes this game so good. So basically you're going to see between, 4 and 6 cards or something like that are going to give you polyomino shapes. And you're going to choose where to place those shapes. In each game, you're going to have 4 different conditions for where you get points from. You can see all of them, but you only score one of them at a time. So you're going to see between 4 and 6 cards, and then you're going to score on the first 2 scoring mechanics. And each of these mechanics is going to go through twice, because you're going to score 4 times 2 scoring systems each, if that makes sense. But it's so cool because you can look as forward into the game as you want. You can play the game just thinking about, okay, after we score twice more, we've got this particular scoring which I can go for from the very beginning of the game, but I'm not actually going to get anything out of it until the very end of the game. And I think that's really cool and clever, and it always feels like you don't have enough time to actually optimize, or enough cards to actually optimize, and you always want more, which I think is perfect. It's got this really nice just climax to the game, which I love, and that is why it is on my top 10 list. It's not a game I actually own. I'm actually a big fan of Thunderworks Games, who make the game. They also have Role Player, which is another great game by them. I think it actually fills a lot of the same categories as Under Falling Skies, just because of the dice manipulation, dice placement, the brain burniness. So yeah, Role Player Adventures, that's not on the list, but I do love Thunderworks, and I am waiting to get their latest game, which is Role Players Adventures, which is going to be really cool. Now, my number 7 is going to be Scythe. And Scythe is a game I love, but I don't really play it that much because I love it because it got me into board games. That's the game that took me back into the hobby. I had played board games as a kid, but hadn't played for a very long time, and I think 3 or 4 years ago, it was with Scythe, and with playing it every week, we would play Scythe, and I loved the game so much, and I loved the achievement sheet in the game, and I've gotten to know it so well. But I think I may have kind of burnt out on it. Though I'm sure that I'd enjoy myself if I played it, and I couldn't not put it in the list because it's the game that kind of brought me back. I'm going to show you the expansion. This expansion, called Rise of Fenris, is something I recommend. If you're getting into Scythe and you want to maximize the experience, I recommend getting this expansion. I actually can't say too much about the other expansions. I've played them most of the time we prefer not using them. And I know sometimes that happens with expansions. This expansion though is different, and it's different because it makes it into a campaign game. There's a lot of modular stuff that you can do in this game, and you can kind of, if you want, you can mix and match, but you've got this cool campaign. The writing was not something I was a big fan of. I'm not going to spoil it for you. It's just, I don't know. It wasn't, the story wasn't very engaging, and I kind of felt disappointed by that. But as a game, I enjoyed it. And yeah, Scythe is my number 7. My next game is Root, and I love Root. I don't have Root every single time I've played Root. I think I've played 5 or 6 times. It's not a game I've played a lot, but every single time I've played it, even though of course it has its problems, I know sometimes, you know, what people generally dislike about it is that you're going to want to play it with the same people, otherwise you're going to just be demolished in it because there is a learning curve. To me, it wasn't that bad. Like, I didn't feel like the learning curve was a problem. I did play with players who were better than me, and those players were better than me, and they won. But it is a game which I think presents so many unique, like, gameplay aspects that I couldn't not have it on this list. Every time I've played it, I've felt there's so much depth to an experience where each of you is playing a different game, and it's so well done. And then the other part of Root, which also gets talked about, but I can't not mention, is that Root is a beautiful, beautiful game. It's just everything in this game, just starting from the rulebook called The Law of Root, and just everything being with these critters, and just, man, I think Root is just a masterpiece. So the next game on my list, I think this game is a masterpiece as well. I know this is sort of a classic game by now. It came out in the 80s. Now the reason I love Dune is because this, in my opinion, is the most thematic game I have ever played in my life. This is like, if you've read the books, which I can't say I've read the entire, like, it's a long series, but I've read enough to understand what kind of the universe is about. And this is a game that manages to capture that, and it feels like such a difficult thing to do, you know, in a medium like this where you need to make players have fun. Doing that as well as making them feel like characters from that book. What you're gonna see in Dune is that the game doesn't feel super balanced, and that's something that to me is very charming. It's just this is a beautiful experience, in my opinion. This, if you want to feel, it's like a cinematic game almost, you know, because everything just so much theme. I love it. Yeah, keep in mind it can take a long time, or it can be shorter. But if you love Dune, if you are okay with a game that, you know, not everything is super balanced, and, you know, it's charmingly chaotic at times, I highly recommend this one. Well, if you're into Dune, I do recommend getting Dune Imperium. Let's see if you can see that better. Dune Imperium is a game that just came out. Everyone is talking about it because it is really worth it. It is just such a great game. It does 2 things extremely well. One is you have worker placement, and the other thing is you have deck building. And this is quite the opposite gameplay-wise from the other Dune. I do not feel like this is super thematic. There is some theme. It's not completely, you know, no theme whatsoever. But if you want a more thematic Dune experience, I would go with the other one. This one, I actually like the artwork in it. It's based on the movie which is going to come out. It is by Paul Dennen, who is the designer of Clank, which is a game I really want to try, but I haven't tried yet. And it is a spectacular experience. I've played around 15 games of this. Every single game is different. You always feel like you're building up you're building up your deck in a different way every game, and every game has felt different, and you can focus on so many things because it's not only worker placement and deck building, but there's also this very small area control type mechanic, which basically you're fighting other players and you can kind of invest in training units for a reward that you're gonna get if you did the most of it that round, basically. But I think that's a really, really great part of this game, is that you can focus on quite a lot of things, and every game does feel different, and it has a wonderful solo mode. If you want to buy this game just for the solo mode, I'd say go for it. Please go for it. It's just so good. On the other hand, I would actually make a suggestion for kind of house ruling this game. And what we do, and you can see it in we did a playthrough of it, is we play 2-player with solo AI. I think it's much better that way, because otherwise 2-player feels, to me, it's a bit too head-to-head. And having that solo AI, because they've done such a wonderful job with it, that it really feels like another player. It feels like a 3-player experience when playing a 2-player. And this game is actually, you're always, like, no matter if you're playing alone or with another player, you're always playing a 3 or 4-player game. This is just such a great game that I've loved it. I just love it to death. Now we go on with a game which I have, but I can't really show you because this game lives over here in my little device, and it's a game called 1000-Year-Old Vampire. And 1000-Year-Old Vampire is a game which I love because it's very different from most games. It's not your average board game or even RPG. You are kind of role-playing, but I don't think that is what makes this game amazing. What makes this game amazing, first of all, the premise of the game, you are a vampire. It is a solo game, and you're kind of playing through the life of this vampire, who you're making up, and you can make it at any point in time. You can name this vampire whatever you want. You can give that vampire all of the riches in the world, or you can make him or her, very poor, or whatever you want. And then you go through that vampire's life, and you're gonna have prompts, and those prompts are gonna have you make decisions about what you want that vampire to experience, or decisions about what happens to this vampire and how the vampire interacts with the world. But there's a twist. Like in every good game, there's always a twist. So the twist in 1000-Year-Old Vampire is, first of all, this vampire is so old that you don't have space to remember everything. So at certain points, you're gonna start forgetting, and that makes the story of this game, to me, really shine. You really feel like that immortal being that doesn't even remember how everything started out. Or another mechanic in the game is that you can start a journal, and in that journal you're gonna write stuff down, but you don't know if it's true or not at one point. You have to trust your journals. And all right, so that's kind of the thematic thing which I do like in the game. I think that is very cool, that you're playing a character. You remember, you know what happened to that character, but the character isn't quite sure. The other thing I love about the game is how the game kind of forces you to make decisions that you wouldn't actually make. For example, sometimes you're gonna have to treat other characters in the game poorly. And you're gonna have skills which you're gonna decide what they are, but the game is gonna force you to use skills. And sometimes the game is gonna make you use a skill which you don't really want to use. Maybe you'll help somebody out by using your impaling skill, and that isn't something you wanted to do, but the vampire in you is making you keeping that hunger alive. But ultimately what this game does for me is it shows me that everyone can be creative. Having those concise prompts, anyone can answer them, You're basically, and you can do it as long or as short as you want. And just the openness and just beauty of this game, I can't recommend it more. And I feel bad because I only have a PDF version of the game. If you can get your hands on the hard copy, it looks beautiful. And they just put so much work and love into that game. and it's definitely worth it. It's a great experience. If you like writing, if you have writer's block, that's a great game to play. So the next game on my list, Mage Knight. It makes a lot of people's top 10 lists, and so it should. It is a grand, giant, beautiful game which offers this experience of just the hero's journey in such a beautiful deck building form. And it's a long game. There's exploration in it. You are playing a Mage Knight who is leveling up, who can by himself or herself take down cities, or burn villages, burn monasteries, kill giant dragons and monsters and stuff like that. And you can recruit units, and you feel the power throughout the game. And even at the beginning of the game, you know, starting out at level 1, you're still a Mage Knight. You can still take out a city if you want. You know, big cities, not in the beginning of the game, but by the end of the game, you probably will be able to. But the game is extremely difficult. As much as I love this game, I haven't won a game yet, which is more me than the game. But yeah, it's a difficult experience. There are quite a few modes of play, but I recommend it as a co-op game, which is how we play it, or as a solo game. Usually I play it at 2 players, to be honest. I know a lot of people play it solo only. For me, 2 players is great. I play it with my brother. We both play quite fast, and we always enjoy it. When it's solo, I'm kind of the type of person that if I want to play a solo game, I don't want there to be too much, like too many components and stuff, and I get kind of lazy and I decide to play something like Under Falling Skies or Cartographers or Dune Imperium even. Like with this game, I feel like it's a bigger game and I want to share that experience usually. But it is a game I love. I love the way that you get to progress throughout the game. You get to level up. That deck building aspect is so awesome. You get to just fight monsters, and it's your classic RPG in board game form, and just the exploration and everything. So this is one of the top games for me. Just so beautiful. I have not played any of the expansions though, and I hear that they're good. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this list. I hope I was able to show you some games that you didn't know about, or maybe you saw that we have the same taste, or maybe you saw that we have totally different tastes and you should tell me about it. I hope you enjoyed this list. If you did, go ahead and click the like button, because I'm starting to do this YouTube thing. I'm really enjoying it. I already have a podcast. I've ran a podcast for about 1 year, which is about game design. If you're interested in game design, I've talked to a lot of the designers of the games that I mentioned. And I've talked to some very famous designers who basically the idea is to talk about how they make games. So if you're interested in making games, I highly recommend checking out the podcast or reaching out at playerlayer.net. We do game development and basically everything that has to do with game design. But this YouTube channel is going to be focused on just board games. And like I said, I'm new to it, so click the like button if you enjoyed this content.